In this world, there are masters of various martial arts who improve and hone their skills in secret from humanity. They use their power to maintain order in South Korea. This story was told by a not-so-young man with graying hair and beard, wearing dirty clothes, who called himself one of those legendary warriors. He raised his hand to the mountain and an aura of green light emanated from him, but when he came to reality, he was cold. He told this story to the boy who worked as a cashier in the store, who took the old man as a weirdo who was talking nonsense. The boy stared at him intently and remained silent, his cheek wound covered with plaster. He was a student at Jones High School. 12 hours before, somewhere in the middle of the warehouse at school, one of the hooligans was beating Dean, the boy from the store, waving his fists and shouting nonsense about martial arts and the Hook sect. The other one was laughing and telling him to stop and just take the money, to which he replied that if he had watched the show he would have been a fan too. At this time, Ding was curled up in pain on the ground. Getting up, he said that he was also watching the divine martial arts show Hook. They were quite interesting, and defiantly said that he almost missed the most interesting part, and said that he had little money. The guy rushed towards the bully saying that the fighters in that show were too far from reality. If they attacked with their techniques, they would be defeated by MMA fighters, and he was thinking of repeating the grip in the waist area to throw the enemy on his back and be on top. But when he approached the enemy, he hit Dean in the face and he fell to the ground, unable to stand on his feet. The bullies began to mock him about how strong he had become after watching such videos on YouTube. But suddenly, the one who had been beating Dean before started hitting him even harder. He threatened to beat him even worse if he didn't calm down and behave in a way that was befitting of his lowly status as an orphan. Dean could do nothing and just tried to cover himself with his hands. Suddenly, a girl with short hair and blue eyes appeared and told them not to block her way. According to her clothes, she went to the same school as them. Her name was Olivia. The perpetrator did not tolerate such rudeness and told her to go the other way if she did not want to get into trouble. But another one stopped him and said her name. Another boy with red hair and golden eyes came to the sound. The boys were not happy to see him and even scared. He asked if he had told them not to bully children. He looked at them angrily and suggested that if they did not run away, he would play with them. The bullies were not so brave, especially the bigger one, who was shouting at Dean so fiercely, so they apologized to Michael for their behavior and ran away. All the angry aura left Michael and he followed Olivia with a smile, asking if she was okay and if she needed to go to the medical center. She replied dryly that she was fine and didn't need any help. The guy approached Dean and helped him to stand up and asked how he was. He accepted the help and thanked them, and the girl turned her back on them and asked why he had gotten involved with them. If he had let himself be beaten, they would have calmed down and not touched him anymore. But he continued to resist them. She said it was better to give up, as cruel as it sounds. As she walked away, she added that if he liked it that way, he could continue to be a punching bag. Michael tailed her and happily offered to go with her despite their serious conversation. While the boy was sitting on the ground, Michael chirped merrily to Olivia, who kept blowing him off. He hit his leg and started to get up, saying that everyone around him was arrogant towards him. Even if he had no money, it didn't mean he had to bow down to them. He was going through a difficult time, but now he could only clench his fists. He worked a part-time job, studied and joined an MMA gym, and the only thing he wanted from his abusers was peace. In a fit of anger, Dean vowed to become stronger and take revenge on all his abusers. During one of his training sessions, the trainer told him that he should stop training, and Dean's mouth dropped open in surprise. The guy thought it was about money and said he would pay it back soon, but it was not about money at all. The coach asked him to pay attention to his body. It was completely different from before. The guy had been training for 6 months when he began to notice changes in his body. It started to grow. The trainer had never seen this before, so he did not understand what the reason was and only assumed that the body itself did not want to change. He put his hand on the guy's shoulder. It was just huge against him, and said that further training was a waste of time, assuring him that he would return the cat because he knew his situation. Dean continued to talk, and the coach stood his ground and apologized, saying that there is suffering in this world that will not pay off. Dean came to the part-time job and did not lose faith in himself, so he thought with determination about what had happened recently, assured himself that he could train independently knowing the training regimen. He grabbed a box next to him and decided to work out while there were no customers. It was night, and wanted to start with a set of squats. But he managed to squat only 4 times before a stabbing pain pierced his entire body, and he fell on the box he had dropped. It wasn't the first time he had felt this pain, he had felt it before, but now it was worse and came more often. He collapsed and grabbed his shirt near his heart, thinking about her, and decided that he needed to take some vitamins. Suddenly he heard screams from outside. Dean turned toward the sound and saw 2 types of gangsters holding down the old man who would later tell the story of the martial arts masters. They accused him of stealing. One of them was angry and grabbed the old man's arm, angrily asked him if he had stolen anything and ordered him to empty his pockets. The old man nervously assured them that he hadn't taken anything, but they didn't listen, and the one who was holding it hit him. The one who was just watching was in a pretty good mood, unlike the one who hit him, who was downright angry. The old man could not resist and fell on his ass shaking with fear on the ground. Furious, he asked his companion if he could continue beating the old man until he felt better, and the old man shook even more and stammered for forgiveness. And then Dean came out of the store and shouted into the phone that an old man was being beaten and asked him to come as soon as possible. The pagans were frightened by what they heard and quickly fled the scene. The boy went up to the old man and complained about these offenders who could only attack the weak and asked if the old man was okay, who in turn asked if he had really called the police, to which the boy replied no, because it would only cause more trouble. Dean helped the man up and he thanked him and said that he was helping him even if it was none of his business, and the boy said that he hated people like that. Dean noticed and thought that the old man's legs could no longer support him because the men were beating on them, and the old man asked who the boy's parents were. And so we returned to the situation with his story. The boy decided to just play along with the old man and asked how a person with such powerful and incredible skills was walking around like that, and the old man replied that he was currently on the run. Previously, there were martial arts units, but now there are only 3 left in the country. A royal company uses its power to control the criminal underworld. A new religious group that believes in a god and follows him as a leader. And the third one, called the Emperor, controls martial arts and everything related to them. Without any warning, these 3 large groups united to drive out the smaller groups. His group also decided to join forces with others of their kind and fight back, but the enemy was too powerful, so they were defeated, many of them unable to survive, and those who could were on the run, like himself. He was barely able to get out and has been in hiding for over 10 years, which is why the old man was excited to hear about the police, because it could make a fuss and attract the attention of this organization, which could cause a lot of noise. The guy was not very interested in this story, so he answered dryly, trying to get rid of him. Dean began to ask skeptically whether the old man was not afraid to tell him this story under such circumstances, but the old man interrupted him and asked who his parents were, because the boy did not answer. The boy reacted angrily to this question and said that he did not know because they had left this world when he was a baby. The old man touched the boy's heart and felt that his meridians were closed. The boy was surprised and asked what the old man was talking about, and he explained that these are the pathways through which energy flows in the body. Even in an ordinary person at least a few are open, but in him all of them are completely open. He assumed that someone powerful had closed them, and the boy asked how this was connected to the nonsense the old man was saying. But the man ignored the question and asked his own. No matter how hard the boy tried, his body did not develop. Dean was surprised and silent, and the old man continued that the body can develop when the channels are open. But he had them completely closed, so he was only giving his body unnecessary stress. At this rate, even a small load would cause him pain. The guy was shocked by the old man's words and remembered the case with the pain attack. If he continues to torment his body, the energy will go in the opposite direction. The result is death. The old man said he could understand Dean's situation and whether it was more important than his life. He advised him to look for another way to solve the problem, because there are ways that are better not to use. The boy laughed and said that he heard the same thing from different people. He realized that he was not a natural fighter and that it was better for someone like him to give up than to suffer like this. He slammed his hands on the table and shouted to the old man that he had not received the necessary family education and had learned to give up in time. He was confident and angry with others who did not believe in him. Dean said that he had set himself the goal of becoming stronger and defeating all enemies that would stand in his way, and no one had the right to stop him. The old man looked down at his hands. They were bruised and scratched, showing how hard he trained. He looked at the man angrily and said either to help him or to forget and go on his way, because the guy would not give up his goal. Then Dean realized that he was standing there arguing with a homeless man, and he softened and said that if he was in pain, he could go to the hospital. The old man was not in a stupor or anything like that. He knew where to look and was thinking about something else. He was looking at the boy's hands, and when he started to speak, he took his hand. The man mumbled that I had no other choice while the boy continued to resist without understanding. The old man with an ominous aura said that he had seen many people like him who had tortured themselves and tested their bodies, which eventually failed. The man warned that he did not like this idea, but if the boy continued to abuse his body, he would not last long, and took his hand with both of his own. He warned the boy that he was going to open his meridians, and the boy was very surprised and protested, but the man ordered him not to move and to stand still. The old man's gaze changed. He was no longer the old man who was being abused by the bandits. He looked more like a warrior. He ordered to be quiet. And now, nothing happened. The old man just bent down from fatigue and said that everything was ready. Without giving any more instructions to the boy, he walked to the exit, complaining about the fatigue of using this energy. Dean just stood there with his mouth open and couldn't say anything. A few hours later, the boy's shift was over and he headed home, thinking about how big the world is and how many crazy people there are. Energy, meridians are not some martial arts fairy tale. Who in the 21st century believes in that? I was thinking that he was beaten for nothing. Suddenly, someone's big hand landed on his shoulder. It was the same bandits who had been mocking the old man. They started picking on him, calling him a smart guy who answered too boldly, even pretending to call the police. The man relaxed and said lightly that it was great fun to have fun with weaklings like him. But Dean grabbed his finger and twisted it, and surprisingly he managed to break the bully's finger. The other one ran over and asked what was wrong. Meanwhile, the guy moved away from them to a safer distance. The guy decided to add gasoline to the fire and started laughing at them. So he was crouching down because of one broken finger. So they were running away from the fake police. It was fun to watch. He took a boxer's stance. The man was furious at his words and rushed at him. Dean pulled himself together and focused on his opponent. He knew when to strike, so he waited for the opponent to approach the right distance, and the moment came. The guy swung for the punch and felt changes in his body. His punch gained momentum, reaching such a strength that even the sleeve of his shirt and jacket flew apart under the pressure of his muscles and the force of air speed. He screamed and air flew out from under his fist, which was distinguished by its blue color, and the men were definitely not expecting it, so they accepted this strong blow that cracked the asphalt. The collision tore both of their clothes, and the state of their bodies was not to mention the cracks in the ground. Dean obviously did not expect this from himself, but he could not move until he heard the old man's voice from behind him, asking if he believed in energy and martial arts now. He panicked why he couldn't move. The old man walked around the guy, going in the direction of the offenders, continuing his speech about the guy's small amount of experience. But he only awakened her, so it was not surprising. A stream of green energy was also coming from the man. Seeing the old man ahead of him, the boy did not understand why he was walking so steadily if his leg was broken, and what was that strange glow that swirled around him. And then the man remembered that he had never introduced himself. His name was Nicholas. He was the leader of the Association of the Inferiors. He was known as the General. The boy was not really interested in this. He was more concerned about the body that was not moving. Nicholas picked the boy up on his shoulder and explained that he was overworked from such a sudden release of energy, and that he should sleep and his energy would be restored. The old man asked where he lived to take him. The boy replied that he lived alone and had nothing to steal from him, to which Nicholas pressed on the point and Dean screamed, not understanding why it hurt so much, and the man replied that it was a pain point. While the old man was screaming, he was thinking about the boy's energy, and it hadn't been long before it had grown so much. The next morning, the two bandits gathered a large crowd around them, each joking about what they were doing here, whether they had fallen asleep drunk or decided to pray. Some thought it was funny, some disgusting, but still everyone stood there and filmed laughing. Olivia was even there with her friend, and she was angrily telling her friend that if she had seen enough, she should hurry to school because they were already late. She felt an unexplained aura, and suddenly a man in a business suit and sunglasses appeared behind her. He dispersed the crowd and approached the two men lying on the ground. He was very tall, everyone else standing there was 2 times shorter than him. Everyone was already leaving, but only Olivia could not stay calm. She wondered who these people were who had come for this man. Dean jumped out of bed from his dream about the previous evening. He wanted to ask the old man what had happened and tried to get up, but he immediately fell down. Even his head hit the floor. His body was shocked by the events and his heart was pounding as if it wanted to jump out of his body. His body was not the same as before. He woke up again in his bed, his body still burning in a state of shock, and he decided to look at him. What a surprise it was to see such a pile of muscles instead of a frail body. Suddenly he saw a spider web of blue light near his face. It was his energy, the old man explained. Nicholas told him to stop making so much noise and to sit down quietly, and he would explain everything to him. The guy attacked the old man, claiming that he had done this to him, but the old man was looking at him, not at him. His blood circulation was normal, so there was no need to worry about his health. Dean did not calm down and asked how he could do this to him. Was it while he was sleeping? The old man replied that he had seen him come back. They hadn't seen each other since last night. Then the boy asked what it was, pointing to his biceps, and the man looked skeptical. This process went on as usual, but very quickly, because the boy had started training a long time ago, and his body was not developing due to closed meridians, and now that they have opened, the body has begun to take on the look he had developed. Nicholas was surprised to see the boy grow by 20 centimeters overnight. Dean was embarrassed by the old man's praise of his hard work on his body, the energy still swirling around him and flying in through his ears. He asked where Nicholas got it from. He said he went to clean up the traces of his work. There was a lot of work to do. The old man reiterated his words about restraint, saying that he had not been found. If he left his words unspoken, it would only be a matter of time before they found him. The boy understood what he was talking about, and the old man advised him to hide his body for a while until he could control his energy so that it would not be found. Dean covered his ears with his hands and thought it couldn't come out like that, but the energy started to come out his nose, so he closed his nose, and the power still found a place to come out and flew out of his pants. The man watched this spectacle with a little delight and said that he would teach him control. While the boy was trying to keep his energy in him, he decided to ask why the old man was called General. To reveal the story, we move back 60 years to Seoul, and the leader's son was talking about the hard times they were facing. He didn't look as prestigious as leaders usually do. He was the leader of the Association of the Lower Ones. He urged the members not to give up and to be reborn in the new culture. They had a lot to change, and the leader began these changes by changing the status of leader to general, when Nicholas was 8 years old. As short-sighted people, they and little Nicholas were happy about this change without realizing its significance. The leader of the Pheasant clan was told what the leader of the lower association was now called, and he began to envy such a cool name in English. But he decided to take an English name as well and settled on Volcano, the name of their chief. The leader of the Myeong clan, having learned about such renaming, also changed it to Shaman, and all the other clans that heard about it also did not want to lose, so each one changed it to something else, cooler. Back in our time, Nicholas called it a tradition with a serious expression. As the old man was getting up, he told the boy to take his time and get up. He asked where he was going and abruptly remembered that he had to go to school, and before he could react, he got hit in the face. He woke up in some kind of mine, lit by lamps that were suspended from hooks above. He remembered Nicholas hitting him and covering his face in fear when he approached, and the man said that since he was awake, it was time to get up. This was one of the hiding places of the lower ones, so they were safe here and Dean could learn to control his energy. Nicholas changed his clothes and took his weapon. Green spider webs of light shot out of him into the air. But there were rules. If he failed, he would never leave this place. This news did not make him happy. It was a reward from the old man. The events are transferred to the city and the people in suits who were investigating the case. A girl who looks like that giant. They both had greenish hair. She was eating cookies with a huge portion of filling and telling some Mick how wonderful and beautiful he was. They were ordered to find the martial artist who had made such a ruckus, but no clues were found. There were no traces of the force, and any martial artist who had survived to this day would not use such force in such a way. The girl didn't understand how Simon ended up in this situation and gave them such a task. The girl missed the old days, to which the giant replied that the past could not be brought back, so she had to accept it. She asked him what he thought about this situation with the men, and he said that the one who did it left no trace at all, and as he got up he said that his work here was done. He added that people without experience did not use this power, and the girl said that they would have found and captured him immediately, and then she remembered the old man, General Nicholas, whom they could not find either. While she thought aloud behind her in the grids, a piece of Dean's energy swirled around, which no one noticed. 2 long months later, in the mine where the old man brought Dean, his blue energy was everywhere. Nicholas, watching over the boy, told him to completely hide his energy. Not long after he tried to hide it, the man told him to release it completely. After the old man's words, the energy instantly spread around the neighborhood, releasing all its power, shifting the air. Around Dean were circles of the strongest energy flow. The old man said that he had nothing more to teach the boy about energy control. He had perfected this skill. Dean asked if he could be free and started whimpering. The old man kept him here for 2 months, forced him to do strange things, as he had nothing to eat and ate vermin, rats and insects. He was whining that he was almost the employee of the month. But now everything was lost. He had missed 2 months of work. He would definitely be fired. The old man came over and pressed on the sore spot in his neck, and the boy thought he had punctured his neck and was bleeding out, but Nicholas said it would just hurt. The old man asked him how he could talk to his mentor in such a tone while the boy was writhing in pain, and he wondered how he had managed to master this control so quickly, even though it was the basis of everything. But it didn't mean it would be easy. It took a year for the talented to master it, and 5 years without talent. And the boy managed to learn in 2 months. This talent was both impressive and frightening. After playing with the sore spot, they parted ways and the boy said he had to go to school because he would be in trouble. The old man asked if he was going to catch up on his studies or for some other reason. Dean looked away and said why else, he still has to go to university. And the old man attacked him and said that he was lying to him too obviously. Letting go of the boy, who fell to the ground, the old man said that he would not listen to him anyway, so there was no point in holding him. Nicholas once again reminded him not to forget his teachings, and the boy replied with confidence that he didn't need martial arts to deal with those bullies. It was morning outside, everyone was still at school, and the idiot had found another boy to punch. He still thought he was cool using the techniques of that sect. His friend asked when he would let him go and get tired of doing this nonsense. And he was only beating him over cookies, taking money from his wallet. One of them remembered Dean and said that it was much more fun then, and the other agreed. Dean came up to them and asked what they were doing. Since he had grown taller, they mockingly started calling him a tiger. They thought that even if he had grown, it did not mean he was stronger. The bully who used to beat him up all the time decided to reward him in honor of his return. But before he could even speak, Dean slapped him hard across the smug face and he fell to the ground with a broken nose. The other one, who had always just watched, was shocked and did not know how to behave. Ding walked up to the boy, who didn't know what to do, and told him that this is how you do those hook techniques, because in real life their kicks require too many unnecessary movements. But the boy didn't listen to him. He was scared, he couldn't believe his eyes, he didn't know if it was really little Ding. The guy asked who would start, and, without waiting for an answer, used the technique usually used by one of the offenders. The bully who remained on his feet shouted at him to wait, and Dean already punched him in the stomach. The unconscious man just rolled downstairs. Knocking out the two guys who were constantly mocking him was much easier than he had imagined, taking the wallet they had taken from the boy and throwing it to its owner. He told the boy to just go to class and not to worry, but he had to keep quiet about what he saw. Now he stood there and didn't know what to do. He must have pushed himself too hard, so he had to get them out of here, but he didn't know where to hide them. He heard a voice behind him asking what had happened. Dean was frightened and turned around to see Olivia standing there. The old man finally got out into the fresh air, stretching on the roof of a multi-story building, continuing his workout. Nicholas thought that it was better to leave the boy there than to let him go. Looking up at the sky, which was covered with clouds, he decided that this was fate, and he was still his student. He will have to help him, and then his monologue is interrupted by those people in suits. They did not expect to see him here and prepared for a fight. The general complained about the noise and released his energy, which whirled into the sky. The air grew so strong from this influx that it moved the crowd a few meters away from the old man. They were not prepared for such a clash and were very young compared to Nicholas. With an unkind look, he asked them if they were on good terms with the king. More people came running to the sound and recognized the general, so the giant decided not to wait and attacked first, swinging his katana. He used a technique called the Sword of Heaven, and delivered a blow that was nicknamed the Blow of Heaven. This strike consisted of a dozen cuts that instantly hit the man. The wall behind him was also hit, and when the smoke cleared, the general stood unharmed, able to repel all the enemy attacks and praised that they had become stronger during this time. One of them ordered to call for reinforcements from the headquarters, and when the man reached for the phone, the old man hit him in the arm with a weapon. The phone and his arm were smashed, the man fell to the ground and the old man hung in the air, wielding his weapon, which resembled a long metal spear without a tip. The girl and the giant were amazed, and in one jerk Nicholas walked the entire distance to the man. The man stood over the girl, who fell from surprise, but they did not lose their power of thinking and surrounded him from all sides, each with a katana. The girl meanwhile jumped to a safer distance. The man Nicholas hit lay unconscious. The old man was thinking out loud, saying that he was old and if the fight dragged on, he would not get into trouble. Twisting the weapon with one hand, he mockingly asked them to be gentle with the old man, and they all attacked him, saying that they should not underestimate the old man. The old man gripped the spear tightly and released his energy, thus unleashing a crushing force that controlled the wind around him, and a strong explosion of greenish color immediately followed, showing who had the power. Meanwhile, Olivia asked what was wrong, and Dean just looked at her frightened. She recognized him, but he still closed himself off trying to deceive her. Suddenly, Michael spoke happily to the girl, saying that he was going to punish the offenders and silence breakers. Even though he tried to hide his face with the hood of his sweatshirt, Michael recognized the guy right away, and Dean wished he had checked the neighborhood first. He greeted them nervously, because they hadn't seen each other for so long, and he lied to them about being sick, but he didn't look sick at all, so they didn't believe him. Dean didn't know how to lie at all, but he tried anyway. He mentioned that he had changed gyms and started working out there. He was much better, so he got a noticeable result so quickly. The guy started to thaw out from the conversation and said he needed to see his teacher. Michael spoke to Olivia and told her that the world has a way of surprising you with such drastic and significant changes. The girl did not believe that he could change so quickly in such a short period of time and had no other options, so she just kept silent and let the boy go, and he went to the teacher. The teacher didn't even look at the boy and just looked at his phone. He told him to study hard and then he would catch up with the work he had missed and ordered him to go to class. Walking down the corridor, Dean breathed a sigh of relief. He was lucky that his class teacher didn't pay much attention to him. Looking at the calluses on his hand, the boy realized why his mentor had asked him to be careful with his powers. Nicholas had emphasized the importance of being unnoticed, and if one of the groups found him and the problems were too great, he should stop using his powers. But he didn't know how not to stand out if he had changed so much in just 2 months. He was impressed himself, and others would be surprised. Putting on his shirt, he decided to blend in as best he could. The plan was a bit of a no-brainer, and there was no other choice. He was sitting in class and surprisingly no one was paying attention to him. He was surprised that no one cared about him. But when Olivia kept looking at him, he realized he was in trouble. Dean knew that she wouldn't expose him, but the way she looked at him spoke of distrust. Out of anger, the boy stood up and shouted at her why she was looking at him, and that he had only done it in his imagination, and that he had actually just laid down on the desk. He was happy that he had defeated her in his imagination and wondered what would happen next, whether everything would settle down if he left it alone. After class, he walked out of the classroom looking around and headed home, thinking that he needed to look for a new part-time job, because he was completely broke. Looking at himself in the mirror, he was convinced that he would definitely be hired for a job in the service sector. Chatting cheerfully with his reflection in the mirror, he turned to his future boss, boldly declaring himself to be meeting such an attractive part-time worker who would sell hot dogs. Olivia approached him and asked him to remove the band-aid from his face. She looked at him and said briefly, without going into details, advising him to lay low because he was in much more danger than he thought, and he was not ready for this revelation, so he silently stared. Their conversation was interrupted by a friend who called out to Olivia. Dean pulled his hood back on, but then a man called out to him, and it was clear from his appearance that he was not a good man. He, a grown man, had come to take care of the kids, defending those 2 bullies who had bullied him regularly in the past. They decided to go to a quieter place, away from prying eyes. Dean hoped they would keep quiet about such a shameful loss. With a confident look on his face, he gave them an hour to resolve the conflict, as he had an interview later. As expected from such rats, he did not come alone. It was not a small group. The man called a bunch of people, not young either, even to call them men. The one who came to the school to pick him up was angry at this audacity, and said that he would not be coming home today. They surrounded him from all sides, and not knowing their opponent, they began to boast that those 2 boys were no match for them, so he would get a good beating. Before one of them could speak, he was hit in the face and earned a broken nose. He fell on the ground from one blow, and Dean noted that he could not see the difference between them at all. There were about 20 of them. They attacked him as a group, realizing that they could not use energy, and would have to rely on brute force. But he didn't notice that one unknown person was watching him. Only Dean was left standing after the fight. The fight was hard and the boy was twice as tired. He needed to be constantly focused on energy, because the more he moved the harder it was to keep it in. Suddenly, that unknown man attacked Dean and hit him in the face. The energy burst out, and when he saw the unknown man's face, he was surprised. It was Michael, but he didn't look as friendly as usual. He was angry. He called Dean a loser. Holding the boy's hair, Michael released webs of his red energy, and noted that he could sense a change in the boy. He asked where he had learned martial arts. At that time, the roof of the high-rise was in complete chaos. The top was broken, the opponents were lying unconscious on the floor, and the old man was complaining about his old age. He was getting tired so fast. Without a single scratch or drop of sweat on his face, he asked in calm tones if it was time to end. The 2, the girl and the giant, strangely enough, turned out to be related. The old man called them the Padalecki kids. They were still standing, tired, wounded, and not giving up to the last. The boy asked what was the meaning of this sudden appearance of Nicholas. The old man did not answer the question. Instead, he asked them why there were so many doubts in their dreams. This question struck the boy. Nicholas continued, if they tried to take his life he would not be able to escape without a scratch. Nicholas ranted about the pointlessness of fighting at half strength and the waste of their strength. If they wanted to live in a martial arts society, they had to live accordingly. If he continues to doubt himself, he will never be able to do anything. The girl was angry and said that he did not understand anything and had no right to say such things to them. She threatened him with reprisals right now, and he only agreed that he had overreacted and was leaving, that if fate put the pieces together, they would meet again, and hurried away from the battlefield. The girl fell to her feet and asked how he had vanished into thin air. She asked how the chairman was, if he was okay. He was silent and only clutched the sword hilt out of powerlessness. Meanwhile, the old man was jumping on the roofs of buildings. With the appearance of a large prey, no one will pay attention to a small one. He did it to distract the enemy from Dean. Jumping further and releasing shreds of energy, Nicholas hoped that this little idiot would not draw much attention to himself. But he had no idea what the boy had already gotten himself into when Michael questioned him. Dean tried to deflect and say he didn't know what he was talking about. Michael decided to take drastic measures and tried to hit him to get the truth out of Dean. But the boy dodged by jumping back, leaving a tuft of hair in Michael's hand. Dean was trying to control his energy, which the boy noted and added that he was only imitating the weak, his hand punching the asphalt. Michael didn't try to hide the energy that was pouring out of him. Rising from his seat, the man threatened that if Dean wanted to live, he would have to continue to evade. Michael said with a smile that his father had a very interesting business. It was one of the 3 large groups of the royal company, and he was its heir. In this industry, they call him Prince, and he said that this was not the time to talk about it. It had only been a few months, and he had already learned these things somewhere. No matter how hard Dean tried, he couldn't close the channels completely anymore because he was overworked, and some of the energy came out and circled around him. Michael again asked where he learned it, and if he told him he would have mercy on him and save his life, but Dean did not consider this option, so he refused. The boy attacked Dean with his fists and threatened to kill him. Dean put up a block and couldn't hold it. Michael used energy, so the blows were strong, and while he was striking he was shouting, calling Dean garbage, that he could only use energy thoughtlessly, whether he felt good about using energy to beat those guys. He thought Dean had trained for this to be on top in school, and now that he was still weak, Michael threatened to take his life and the one who taught him this. He, as the heir to the company that oversees the use of these powers, said that this shouldn't be happening, it shouldn't be happening. He kicked the guy and he went flying to the ground, even more energy released from his body. While Dean was trying to get up, Michael asked why he had ever studied martial arts. Everything would have been fine if he hadn't gotten involved in this mess. Dean could only manage one word. Damn! And he continued to tell him that if everything had been fine, he would have saved him and the bullies in front of Olivia. Dean didn't understand what she had to do with it, and then the man revealed the terrible truth: they were his puppets. They played the role of the bad guys while Michael flaunted his authority and strength in front of Olivia, nobly protecting Dean from them. It was just a game to attract the girl. Dean's mouth fell open at the surprise, unable to speak. According to Michael, the fun was over and it was time to end. He released more energy and prepared to strike, and suddenly Dean agreed with him, and getting up from his knees he said that he was so excited when he found out his secret, and now he knew what to do. Dean stood in a stance, released his energy and admitted that he needed to study and train more, and would think about everything else later, and called Michael an idiot if he thought that in our time a girl could be won by such methods, only with his tongue and knowing how to scratch, a piece of short-sightedness and not a prince. Michael was seriously outraged by these words. His eyes burned with rage. He clenched his teeth so hard that the muscle was visible on his cheek. He attacked Dean, shouting that Dean was only copying his punches, but then he noticed that his punches were not hitting the guy, but only flying away. The boy learned a new technique, using the energy to make a shield by condensing it, and asked if the prince was sure he was as strong as he thought. Noticing Dean's look, he shouted not to look at him like that and decided to use his trump card techniques. His fist lit up with a bright red light. Dean decided to accept the fight and said to attack as well, surrounding his fists with energy. The prince's technique was called the Light of the King. He instantly approached the guy and prepared to strike. They tried to hit each other fist to fist. Michael's punch was strong and compared to his mentor it was nothing. But the fists didn't finish their test of strength, and another of his group hit the guy in the back of the head, which made him faint and passed out. Michael was not expecting to see him either, so he asked what he was doing here. He was holding his hand if he was hitting him, so he got it. He greeted the young man and said that he had been at an urgent meeting where they were informed of the general's arrival, and he sat down to look at the boy who was lying there. He went for a walk and felt some energy, decided to check it out, and saw the prince with his friend, and said that the boy owed him a favor. The boy was surprised, and the man replied that he had saved him, and it would have happened in a second. Michael interrupted and told him not to talk nonsense. Michael became angry at his client's words and began to shout that he would have beaten him himself if he hadn't interfered. He reacted mockingly and asked for a sincere apology for his misbehavior, to which he only called him names. After the conversation was over, the man said he was taking his friend and put him on his shoulder, and smilingly noted how interesting and fun the meeting had been. When Dean was being carried away from the battlefield, Olivia was hiding in a tree and was clearly excited by this development. The story shifts to the royal company's headquarters. Padalecki's family was walking down one of the building's corridors and the girl complained that she didn't want to go there and offered the excuse that she was sick. The boyfriend said that there was no point in running away. Even if she didn't like it, she had to be patient. Approaching the main door, which was flanked by guards, they introduced themselves as Simon Padalecki, the giant who held the title of 6th chairman, and his sister Sylvia Padalecki, who was the 7th chairman. Their identities were confirmed and they were allowed to proceed. They went inside, where the president was waiting for them, and there were 4 other people sitting there. They were the top managers of the royal company called 7 Departments. One of the people present asked if the rumors that they had been beaten by the general were true. She was the second head of the 7 Departments, nicknamed Running, and she called them a bunch of idiots. The third head, Glasses, remained silent with a smile on his face, only adjusting his glasses. The fourth head, Tank, laughed at this spectacle, and the fifth head, Speed, did the same, lowering his hat over his eyes. Sylvia shouted furiously what she would change if she were in their shoes, and Big replied confidently that she had done better than them. Big also got angry and asked if they wanted to duel with her. Pulling out her katana, Sylvia was ready to start, but her brothers ordered her to calm down. The president ordered them to stop, releasing the energy. He told them to calm down with a stern expression. Smith, nicknamed King, gathered them to gnaw like dogs. Smith said that the general was strong, so no one would blame them for losing. They had to act as a team. Speedy asked why he had suddenly appeared after so many years in hiding. Tank asked why he was asking if he was scared. The president turned to Simon and asked if anything strange had happened, and he replied that he thought he had deliberately drawn attention to himself. Big asked him why he thought so, and he replied that the general had many opportunities to escape and stayed. Also, as much as he hated to say it, if he had wanted to, everyone on the roof could have survived, but he only wounded some of them. Simon got the feeling that he wanted to attract attention, but didn't want to make too much noise. Smith agreed that this assumption made sense, and Big clung to them again, saying that based on the situation, they owed their lives to the enemy, who had praised their family so much and stumbled so badly. After asking if they were ashamed, Sylvia protested that this was a different situation, but Simon blocked her and said that, unfortunately, it was. Glasses suggested that if Simon's theory was correct, then the general had something he didn't want to show. A man burst into the room, took Dean away, and assumed from what he heard that he might be a student of the general. The man, Claude, was the first chairman and had the surname Cruel, and he apologized to the president for being late. Big asked him why he was here, and he told her that he wouldn't come because he was bored and had nothing to do. Claude was outraged by this accusation and said that sometimes he had to miss meetings due to important circumstances. Throwing the guy to the ground, he replied that when he was here, he did his best. The brutal man turned to the president, called Dean his son's friend, and said that he was quite good, so he decided to interfere, but if he hadn't interfered, his son would have won. Stepping on the boy's foot, the man continued and said that by playing with him they would find the truth. Olivia was no ordinary student. She threw off her school uniform and dressed in combat gear. Securing her sword behind her, which had an engraved eagle emblem, she set off. Jumping over the walls of the building like a jumper, she reached the boy's apartment. But as soon as she grabbed the handle, a spear flew near her head. It was the general. He said that she could not just walk into someone else's house and noted a familiar uniform. He asked her to think carefully before answering who she was. She did not answer, but only told him to put down his weapon because she was in a hurry. He stood his ground and ordered her to answer. She said she understood why he was familiar with the uniform. She introduced herself and said she was on the same side because she was the daughter of His Majesty, as evidenced by the emblem on her sword. He put away his weapon, and she said he should remember him. The general said it was impossible to forget him. Her father was the leader of the Pure Stream group, nicknamed His Majesty Yukai. He was one of the strongest warriors who fought against the emperor that the general knew. Yukai was strong, wise, and energetic, and just by looking at him, he cheered Nicholas up, but in one of the battles he was ambushed and defeated by sheer numbers. And now his daughter was standing in front of him, and he said that he had a lot of questions and would ask only one. Of course, he realized what was going on and asked what had happened to Dean. She realized that he was his mentor and informed him that he was now in danger. At that time, the guy was taken to a room and chained up. The boy was holding up well and didn't say anything except for a grunt of pain. Claude showed him a photo of Nicholas and asked if this old man was his mentor and where he was hiding. Dean remained silent and tried to release his energy. But the chains were not ordinary. They responded to the energy and strangled the guy harder. The man came up, grabbed Dean by the hair and promised that if he answered honestly he would let him go. Dean just snarled in his face, but he managed to snap a photo. Claude was both pleased and angry at this audacity, thanked the boy for breaking his mask and went to the tool table with an angry face. Dean understood that it was entirely his fault, even though his mentor had warned him, but he was too careless and gave in to his emotions. So the boy said to the offender that he could do whatever he wanted, but he would not succeed, because he knew nothing. Claude looked at the instrument without turning to look at the voice, and said that everyone says that at the beginning. After picking up the scalpel, Cruel released some energy, and said with a jovial tone that they would start with his fingernails. The president asked how things were going, and Glasses replied that the intelligence had already started working and if they waited a little longer, they would soon receive the first stream of information. Finally, they had the opportunity to catch the general, so they must not miss it, he said, releasing his energy from excitement. He said that if they managed to catch him and take what he had, they would be able to beat even the emperor, and their company would be on top. The report on the general, which Smith was clutching with energy, began to tear up. He asked what about confidentiality, because other groups were not supposed to know about it. The man replied that there was no problem with that at the moment. Two people approached the building, a woman and a man, and she released her energy and told them to leave, and they listened to her. She was dressed in a yellow dress and had earrings in the shape of an eye surrounded by rays. They went inside, and the guards at the president's office heard some sounds coming from the headphones and started to call back, and then the unknown men approached them. The guards were very surprised to see them in the building without permission. The woman noted their abilities and realized that words alone would not be enough to persuade them. The man said that nothing could be done and approached them. Security responded and called for reinforcements in an emergency situation and told them to warn the CEO. The man went first. He used the energy, which was yellow in color, and raised his hands to the guards around him. They froze in place, unable to move. With a little more energy, the men flew into the door with such force that they knocked it out. Okoki was still standing in the office, startled by the surprise, but the president remained calm, as if he had expected them to come. The woman turned to the king and noted that they had not seen each other for a long time. She was a leader of the Shikni, nicknamed God, and she had heard rumors about the general. A man spoke up and, according to the agreement, asked to share all known information about this case. This man's name was Roger, and he was more often called the Emperor. It was a quiet night outside, and Olivia waited for the old man, and when he came out he said that they should be ready. He was dressed in traditional green clothes and apologized for keeping them waiting, especially since they would be fighting the king. They had to do their best and give it their all. He could not believe that Dean was in the same class as his son. It was no coincidence. But when he pointed out that she was there for a reason, too, the girl confirmed the old man's guess and said that she had gone to the same class as Michael on purpose. She was gathering information while undercover to get closer to them and avenge her father. She said with confidence that this was the opportunity she had been waiting for and asked if he could defeat the king. Nicholas replied that he was old, and the king had just gained strength, and they were going into his territory, which made the situation much more difficult. The old man said not to worry. He released the green energy, and declared that he would not lose to the king. He would never lose. The scene returns to the headquarters where the commanders are resolving a misunderstanding. God spoke of a meeting that had taken place once in 10 years, but they hadn't changed at all. The king responded aggressively and called her a witch. She just laughed and thanked him for the compliment. The emperor said that this was not the time for such talk. He turned to Smith and demanded all the information he had about the general. The glasses protested, but God did not allow him to continue. She forced him to shut his mouth and sit aside. The emperor continued, saying that it was useless to pretend. He had some guesses, and the king, not understanding what he was talking about, asked what he meant. He mentioned 2 important facts, one about a direct attack on his group and the other that they were holding a schoolboy believed to be the general's student. The king was shocked that the information was in the hands of the enemy so quickly. After the war 18 years ago, their groups made an alliance between their groups. According to the alliance, they are obliged to share information about surviving illegal martial artists, and they should cooperate if they find any of them, including the general. Nicholas is a strong A-level wizard, so all information found about him should be delivered to their bureau. Taking off his glasses, the emperor noted that the king had not fulfilled the terms of the agreement. This was his last chance to fulfill the condition. If he did not, they would be forced to take the necessary measures. The emperor released his energy, showing the seriousness of his intentions, and threatened to dissolve the royal company. Giving an angry look, he asked the king what they would do, and he realized that the emperor was not joking. Meanwhile, the general and Olivia approached the royal company, landing on the roof of a building nearby. The girl suggested where they might be holding the boy. She knew the structure of the building roughly and said that he must be in the basement, where there was an interrogation room. The old man said that so many years had passed and the stench of the mud was still the same as before. He laid out a plan of action. First they had to get Dean, so they had to get to the basement. Suddenly, they felt a surge of energy released by the emperor. The old man immediately realized who it belonged to. No one else had such a fierce aura. He had already scouted everything and came to check the information. They also assumed that the third person was also present, because they had all signed the contract together. Olivia made a logical conclusion and said that in this situation they should retreat. The general would definitely not be able to resist the 3 of them at the same time if they burst in now and grabbed them, and they would not be able to help Dean. She thought that they would not lose him because he had important information for them, even if Nicholas did not like to hear it, and the girl was right. At that time, the king decided not to take any chances and led the commanders to the room with the boy. The king knocked on the door, and it was opened by Claude, who did not see who was standing in front of him. He said, busy, and abruptly closed his mouth, realizing the picture, saw the guests. God smilingly asked if he was a good boy. The king asked the cruel if he could get anything out of the boy, and looking at the tortured boy, he said that he had not gotten anything out of him yet. Dean was doing well, and Claude assured him that in another day he would split. God said she didn't have time for that and wanted to talk to him now, and the Emperor agreed to this, following her to the body. She approached him and saw that he had been badly abused, and Dean told her to just leave. She said her daughter was the same age as him, and the boy told her much more. She touched his face and said she would make him feel comfortable, but there was no comfort there. The woman used force and asked where General. The boy understood that he shouldn't speak, but his mouth moved on its own. He couldn't resist it. He just managed to say the word General, when he heard a voice behind him. Nicholas still didn't listen to the girl and came to save the boy. The captains were amazed by this appearance, and the Emperor spoke to Nicholas. It was a surprise for him as well. He asked if he thought the king was here alone. The old man replied that he knew about the presence of others, but there are times when it is impossible to retreat, and looked at the tortured boy. The general became serious, and released his energy, and stood in a stance, full of determination and anger. He said that they dared to touch his student, or were they ready for the consequences. The girl did not follow and remained on the roof. She could not move. When they were discussing the plan of action, the general realized that he would not retreat, and he did not want to take her, so he hit the points that blocked the movement, and she fell. He told her not to worry and to sit here. When he freed Dean, he would take her and open the channels. She asked him why he did it, and he said that he was tired of seeing young people take their lives for the sake of the old. In the present tense, Dean called out to the teacher, who gave him a warm look and told him to wait. It would be over soon. The king was the first to fight, using the royal bracelets technique, which instantly lit up with a red glow. The general responded by using the first phase of the battle spear, and they clashed in a blow. But Nicholas combined his strikes and kicked his opponent in a reversal. He didn't expect the blow and still managed to put up a block, but he still flew away from the old man, stopping for a long time with his hand on the ground. But first he needs to deal with them, the old man managed to say, and the king's eyes were bloodshot. The king turned to his wards and ordered them to go and protect the workers. Claude was upset and said that such a game had started here. He also wanted to measure his strength against the general. Glasses confirmed the words of the cruel one, and did not have time to add anything, because the king said that he would handle it himself. He ordered Claude not to join the battle, but he was offended and did not dare to do so, so he dragged Glasses along and said that now even God would not stop him. God said that he had always been interested in strange things before the emperor, who simply remained silent. The old man said that he was still as smug as ever. The king surrounded his arms around his shoulders with energy, and he led the way, then attacked the general. He said that he was millet confident and threw a punch called the power of the angry tiger. The old man deflected the blows and noticed how much stronger Smith had become since their last meeting. He shouted if this was the best the old man could do and said that he had trained hard for this moment. It was revenge for a loss 18 years earlier. He strengthened his arms even more for the next attack. The old man noticed the king's strength, but he was not the only one who became stronger. At that moment the general was more energized and used the sixth phase of his technique at once. The king flew even further away from his blow, despite the shield, but still, such a blow is not easy to withstand, so it was also impressive that he only flew away. Nicholas came closer for another attack. The old man fooled the king and instantly slipped through him to Dean. He broke the chains and grabbed the boy, which Smith did not expect. The general asked if he could stand on his own, and the boy asked why, since it was his fault that he was caught. Nicholas replied that the mission of a teacher is to protect the student. The king was angry and shouted at the old man, but he didn't want to fight anymore. He told the boy that they would talk later, and now they had to get out of here. Nicholas put his hand inside his uniform and pulled out a smoke screen. The king could not imagine how it exploded and immediately filled half the room. He shouted to the general what kind of tricks he was playing, and the latter shouted back that he was as stupid as he was and remained. The mentor asked Dean to hold on a little longer as he approached the exit. Then God got involved in the battle. She hit him with her fan, saying that it was not appropriate for him to use modern tricks, but the general repelled the attack. She said she was just watching the battle, but but she couldn't stand by while it was going on. The emperor supported her, and added that he had allowed the king to fight him one-on-one. But now they could not stay away, they could not let the general go. The old man expected that things would not be easy and asked the boy if he could run, and he said yes. Then the general threw the boy toward the exit, who was not expecting this and was shocked by his mentor's actions. Closing the door to the room, the old man told him to get out of here while he held them up. Dean shouted for him to wait, but the door was already closed. Staying in the room with the captains, he said that even under such circumstances he had achieved what he wanted. Now they can engage in a real battle. If they want his life so badly, let them try to come and take it. Dean beat his fists on the door and called for his mentor. He fell to his knees right next to the door and blamed himself. If he had behaved rationally, this would not have happened, but now he could only grit his teeth. Suddenly, he heard a sound behind him and asked in surprise how he had managed to escape. It was Claude, holding interestingly designed swords. He noted how timely he had come in, and Claude said that he had promised the general not to hurt the boy, but thought he wouldn't mind if he played a little. The man put down his weapon and said that he was going to be a bit of a challenge for the boy, so he had to show what he could do. He would fight with only one sword. Dean heard him and became even more enraged. He released his energy by rising from his knees and assured him that he would take his life right there. The emperor realized that the general was just trying to buy time for his student to escape. He released yellow webs of energy and asked him if he really thought he could stand up to the three of them. The old man said that they would find out now. He jumped back with such force that the cement shattered, creating a hole, and pounced on his previous opponent, the king, and hit the machine with a force many times stronger than the one he had used before. Smith did not expect this, so he did not even have time to release his energy. The man thought it was a complete attack and thought of its power. As Nicholas refined it, and hit him harder, that king was unable to stay on his feet. As he fell loudly to the floor, the other two just watched. Smith called Nicholas an old prick barely getting up after his attack. The emperor found out that the old man was using the energy of life to make himself stronger. The old man replied that he was fighting against the three of them, so he decided that it would be more fair to him. The emperor said that he did not understand the old man at all and asked if the boy was really that important to him. The old man replied that he would never understand, because he looked at people as a resource, and lowering his spear to the ground, he noted that this room was too small for a four-man battle.